I want to touch on how we may evolve into the future in relation to having a connection to heart or spirituality. I don't want to make it a humongous subject out of this. I want to have it so that laymen, every one of us, can kind of relate so that it doesn't look like a huge hurdle to overcome. Yet, what I see is that the situation in the world is shifting so rapidly, turbulence, and the AI technology has a major impact for our future. So I was actually talking with my friend just a while ago, and I was pointing that the gap between those laymen and those who are advanced in the intellectual end of the spectrum to extend our brain with AI, this gap may widen. And because of the technicality of digital stuff can do all sorts of complex issues, even though there are lots of problems, and that's my concern. But still, the world would be more complex, not in a negative sense only, but because complexity is to capture lots of things we can do, which we couldn't do in the past. But as soon as we put more brain power forward and the world shift toward that end, what I'm concerned is that the people, general people, who are not inclined to be intellectually interesting to follow up and know the complexity and deal with the situation. And actually, I experienced that. I have an engineering background. I've done lots of tax return by myself without using an accountant because it was intellectually interesting process to how much I can do it. But today, I give up from 2 years ago, just use the tower tax. And even with that, following up all the lines that what you have to check is getting longer and longer. And the legal issues, the regulation is expanding. So you have to check here and there. All the ramification of that make it the process so complex. So even though you are paying money, almost $200 for the federal and California, in my case, I don't like to pay because I have an MBA, so I want to do my own way, but this is too much, which means even those with MBA background, it's too much to handle these complex issues, legal issues popping up here and there, and digitally we can handle it. The technologically they can do it, but the human mind cannot work. So that in my case, I have to use the TurboTax, but even that is difficult, as I said. And what it means is that the people, the general people, are left behind all the movement, and you kind of have to trust whatever is happening. But the complexity is in there, so that something goes wrong. Sometimes airplane cannot land, or technology make a mess out of it. And because of the waste elimination also, things get tighter and tighter, not much room for error. So any little bit and pieces can create problem. Even if you have the quantum computer, it may do even worse to do so much of the potential error situation to happen. And that's the direction we are heading, and exponentially even. And I don't like that. I'm an old man, so maybe that's natural for old men to feel like it. And the younger people may be able to keep up with it, and they get the bigger and bigger brain, and they are more smooth to address the issue more intuitively. But just my comment on this is that many people may not be so much interested in intellectual advancement, but have a peace in mind and have a basic life. So let me tie this discussion with my view of Zen and Shin Buddhism. This is more familiar subject. So Zen, meditation, typically in Japan was more like a samurai and high-ranking people with the intellect. because it's interesting to figure out what the brain goes wrong and the suffering happens. So they try to figure out, and they call it the self-power that they try to figure out. But at the end, awakening can only happen when you let go of your ego. But that's the process of Zen that I think has happened in general. So what happened is interesting is that Shin Buddhism is mainly for laymen who are not intellectually actually advanced. It doesn't mean to say they are not smart. It means that they are not interested in the complexity of the legal issues and all the protocols and details and things of that nature, but rather be happy with whatever they got. So they may be less inclined to the technological, intellectual advancement, but rather to keep their space more related to the heart instead of the intellect. So when the Shin Buddhism popped up, and that is related to those people at the layman, and many of them are intellectually not advanced. Many of them couldn't read and write, but that was quite fit for them. And I have a strong feeling to those people because when I read and meet some of them, and for those who have gone through all the process to be awakened, just like Zen awakening, but coming from different angles, so to speak, it's very heartwarming that you don't need a self-power, intellectual advancement, but rather the trust for Amida Buddha in the case of Shin Buddhism, which is basically to say Namu Amida Butsu, which means Namu, let go of myself, for Amida Buddha to take over with her compassion or his compassion, because the suffering is too much, intellect doesn't work, and there's something not quite fit for them, so that they feel suffered sense. Where do they go? And I have this compassion sense to the people at the shop floor. That's what I worked on it. And I worked with the top management, and they tend to do top down, and people start to say, just tell me what to do. And I wanted the people at the shop floor to be empowered to manage their life. Anyway, that's the case for the organization, but traditionally, when the Shin Buddhism was spreading out in Japan, rural part of the people, without much access to the intellectual advanced state, joined this idea with the Namu Amida Butsu. And what I shared already is that the samadhi state is no mind, no self. So actually that's how the enlightenment happens, as was taught by Buddha. And I went through the meditation and had that awakening, and it's very close to the Soto Zen, Dogen Zen, to be open up your mind, not closed, but connecting to the heart. But I can relate to the Shin Buddhism, especially Myokonin, who are compassionate and they have this transformation. So my hypothesis, or just questioning here, is that in the future when the gap goes wider, that's my expectation, and the people who are left behind may want to have their own space of living, kind of close to the Garden of Eden. Not much intellectual thing, but eating a little bit of the fruit of knowledge, and just stay with wonderful nature. And the ones who are going forward may go to Mars and other galaxy and so forth. They are in the digital brain, extended way of living, exploration. That might be fine. Let me see if I can still do this. Yeah, still recording. Okay. My battery goes out soon. So anyway, that gap of advanced technology, intelligence versus compassion, it's like a right brain and left brain, or the brain and heart kind of relationship. And I'm more into traditional, conservative, basic, close to nature, simple life kind of guy. And if you lose that, as much as I did with this tax return and the checking of this TurboTax and complex, and I spent this morning lots of time and confused here and there, even after paying $200. It's getting too much for people who may not have some financial resources, and they get into trouble. I don't like that. Anyway, I don't mean to make a negative point of it. I'm trying to make the case so that this Namamidabutsu, the same notion of Shira Samadhi Panya, Samadhi, no mind, no self, and connecting to heart, and the heart in their case is Amida Buddha. So Namo Amidabutsu. Multiple times a day, they may reconnect and be with the flow of the universe, although it may sound like very outdated or traditional, or what will be the other one? Something young people may not want to do because they're interested in the games and the new challenges with the brain. But what I'm saying is that be careful. If you're young, even you're old, be careful. Because once you get into the tanglement of the intellect, like I did with this morning, spending hours for the tax return, it may change, it may improve, and you may accept, but I see a potential danger that things go wrong. So that's, I guess, was the main point that I wanted to share. Be prepared. Figure out which direction you want to take. I try to work out AI so that AI can get better to customer friendly, but even with that, so if you are intellectually advanced or interested, learn about AI as much as I'm doing. I may not use so much, but it's so important, so I do it. And I'm so frustrated because AI is still dumb and stupid in many ways. But it's a learning of our brain, how it works. And that's a good example of using that as a reference, so that when we use a brain, like the AI is trying to figure out, and more power, more memory, and so forth, our brain is going into that direction. And that doesn't sound like a lively thing connected to heart. What do you think? Maybe you have no basis to think or think deeper, but that's the concern. And if you make a choice in some way, the impact of that could be fairly significant. So don't scare you, but even if you're interested in AI, it's a mechanical thing, the brain thing. Don't forget the heart. And if you forget it and lose contact with your heart into samadhi and connecting, which is like the same as the melting into the nature, you are less of a human and more of a robot, advanced robot. And where do you have a joy of being advanced robot or using the advanced robot? What do you do? Give me your opinion. That's going to be your life, if you're lucky. Before that, something worse can happen. Then you prepare for that. How do you prepare? Just a little for you to pay attention to. Maybe a tiny bit of warning, because I don't want to scare people. But that's where I stand, and I want to share openly. I don't have a solution. Each person's decision is different. But that's the important thing. Don't be blinded, just follow someone else's lead. It may be necessary for you to rely on someone, but worst case, go back to this Namami Dabutsu. If the thinking and working and struggling or having fun in this modern society is too much, make sure that you have this, you can remember connection to your heart, samadhi, to save your life, find your liveliness, even to cut the tree branches and pick up the lemon and the tomatoes from the garden, and all the other stuff. The miracle is happening out there. Miracle of nature or miracle of technology. That's one way to think about this. I'm not telling any answer. I'm just giving some sense because each of you is to make a choice. So, just a thought. Thank you.